Uh, there we go. Is that better? Everybody okay? Wide awake? I'm glad for everybody's safe arrival, and it feels weird because we haven't done this in a couple weeks, but um, this morning, even though our plan was to have finished Exodus last week and be getting into Leviticus this week, we're going to change that, and we're going to finish Exodus this week since we didn't get a chance to do that, and we didn't really have a good way to kind of get everybody on the same page. So what we will end up doing is we will try to fit Leviticus into the rest of the month of December. I'm not sure yet how we're going to do that, but I think where there's a will, there's a way. So we'll finish up Exodus today with chapters 35 through 40, and a lot of ground to cover, but also I think a lot of things that we can look at sort of from a high level. So we'll get into the text here in just a minute, but before we do that, we're going to pray, and Eddie's going to lead us in prayer. So let's bow.
Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you and we thank you for this day. We pray that there's issues in our lives with the holidays coming up and such a busy December that we keep our eyes focused upon you. I pray that what's said this morning as we cover Exodus, dear Lord, that we take it and apply it to our lives and with a thorough understanding that it does change our lives and how we look at things. If there's someone in there this morning, dear Lord, that's having struggles, I pray that they seek someone out to maybe share that burden and get some relief from that. I pray that you keep us safe throughout the day, and I pray for our lost ones in our families. I pray for our children and grandchildren that you keep them strong and healthy, and bless this service in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Eddie. Okay, Exodus 35. What I want to do just briefly by way of review and refresher is to think about the setup of the tabernacle. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a little tour this morning, entering the tabernacle from the direction that it was designed to face. So what I'm going to do as we go through this tour is as we come to a new place in the tabernacle, I'm going to ask you what you're going to be looking at. I want a different answerer, a different person to answer each time, so no repeats. You get one shot. So if there's one thing that you know in the tabernacle, hold your place for that question, and that'll be yours. But let's start with this. What direction was the tabernacle designed, or was the tabernacle built to face? What direction was it always supposed to face? In terms of the opening of the tabernacle, anybody want to start out with that one? Maybe I should have given you an easier one. You only have 4 options. It's not a process of elimination. East. Yes, east. So the tabernacle was always set up to face the east. So we enter the tabernacle courtyard from the east, and the first thing we're going to come across would have been what? What piece of furniture or what vessel or what implement? Who wants to give it a try? In the courtyard, you have 2 options for the furniture that was in the courtyard. What do you think the first one was? Don't be shy. Ann, yes, ma'am. Okay, so the basin was the other one. We're going to get to that second, which if you are a poacher, then now is your time to poach because there's only one answer left here. So what's the first piece of furniture that you would have come to? The altar. Which one? Okay, and let me ask a different question. What was offered on this particular altar? Cheryl, what did you say? The animals. Yeah, the altar of burnt offering. Although the burnt offerings weren't the only offerings that were offered on that altar, this is the altar where all of the animals were sacrificed. There's another altar when we get into the tabernacle itself. We'll talk about that in a minute. But so you come to the altar of burnt offering first, and then beyond that, between that and the tabernacle itself, was the laver or the basin for washing of different kinds. Okay, so now we're going to enter the tabernacle, and the first room of the tabernacle would have been called what? The holy place. Good. And in the holy place, when you enter, let's go on your right. So this would be north. If you enter from the east and you look on your right, you look north, what would you see? What piece of furniture? Yeah, a table with what on it? Good. So a table of bread or showbread that was changed out with regularity. Some of that bread was allowed to be eaten by certain of the priests. So that's on your right-hand side. What about on your left-hand side toward the south? What would have been there? I think Ann said it. The candles, yeah, the lampstand. So you'd have a lampstand that was lit, that was kept burning. And then at the far end of the holy place, what else? There's the other altar. What was that for? Somebody hasn't. Okay, Dale hasn't answered. Incense. So the altar where you would burn incense was kind of at the far end of the holy place when you come into, I guess it would be on the west side of the holy place. Now on the other side of the altar of incense was a thick curtain. And behind that curtain was the second room, what was it called? The Holy of Holies, or sometimes the most holy place. Very good. And what was inside the Holy of Holies, the most holy place? Linda? Okay, very good. Ark of the Covenant. So that's our brief tour of the tabernacle. If that's something that's new information, go ahead and keep practicing that, commit that to memory, because those are the kinds of things that, read all about them here in Exodus, but they're sprinkled throughout the rest of Scripture. So you have references to these. The Ark of the Covenant is prominent during the early kingdom years. You have references to the altars, even in the New Testament, in Hebrews especially. So it's helpful to kind of have just a snapshot in your mind of this. Now, we're going to get into the building of the tabernacle, the plans for the tabernacle in just a moment. But the beginning of this section of text in chapter 35 is interesting because before the tabernacle starts to be built, God gives them a reminder about the Sabbath day and keeping the Sabbath, which is interesting. Because you don't typically think of the Sabbath in connection with the tabernacle, but let me just ask you, do you see any reason that before the tabernacle construction would have been initiated, that God reminded them of the Sabbath? Would there be any significance to that, perhaps? What do you think? And I'll tell you, there's no right or wrong answer to this question. Okay. Okay, good. Cindy, did you have something you want to add to that? Oh, he said sometimes we get busy with activity, things that are important, and it's easy to forget to rest or to take the time off. Was kind of the idea of it. Okay. Good. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And to be clear, I don't know that it specifically says this, but I think it's reasonable. And I think it definitely shows the importance that God wanted to place on the idea of rest. You rest because I rested after I finished creation. You rest because you just got out of a place where you didn't have rest for hundreds of years. And I think to the points that were well made, when you get such enthusiasm about this project, I mean, God is going to dwell among the people. This is revolutionary for their identity. It's formational for their identity as a people. So it would make sense that this is something they're just going to want to jump into and all hands on deck, let's get this done. But I think this is a reminder to them that we still do things God's way. And if God puts parameters in place, including days of rest, then those need to be observed. So it's really interesting that the chapter starts out with that. Now, as far as the preparations for the building of the tabernacle, where did the provisions come from, and what can you tell me about the process of collecting all of those provisions for the tabernacle? Let's see, Bruce and Cindy.
Well, I know when they left Egypt, they were to take spoils, people Egypt gave them things. So I would imagine that some of the things came from their leaving Egypt, and then some of the spoils that they collected along the way in the journey.
Okay, good. So the materials, perhaps many of them, if not all of them, coming from the plundering of the Egyptians before they leave on the cusp of the last plague. The Egyptians give them great wealth. They give them provisions. They give them valuables of all kinds. So it would make sense that those were some of the things that were then used for the tabernacle. Cindy, do you have something you want to add?
Their attitude was that had to be willing, free will offering, and
Okay.
they were eager to do that.
Good. So this is really, I think, important as well. You have the offering of things that really had come from God in the first place. This was really just giving back to God what he had already blessed them with. And so the attitude toward that is a really important part of how this is going to be constructed. God didn't want to mandate anything, as Cindy said, but this was something that he wanted to be done voluntarily. Phil, yes, sir?
From the description of the stuff in book 8, 9, 10, all that stuff, it appears to be really expensive stuff.
Okay.
This isn't the bottom of the barrel stuff.
Okay, good. So some of the finest materials that you could probably find in the ancient world, especially, I think that makes sense if this is coming from the wealth of Egypt, and not a smattering, but all of Egypt seemingly participated in this plundering or the giving away of goods, which God calls the plundering of Egypt, by the way. So it's kind of interesting because Israel doesn't even have to fight. Egypt just kind of brings it to them and says, hey, parting gift, we're really sorry about the last few hundred years, just leave us alone. And so they give them all of this stuff. And so what God does with that is he essentially takes the first of it. Although there's a lot of time that's passed here, but I think the idea is that God wants the best, God deserves the best. This is what it's going to require for God to dwell, or what's going to be required for God to dwell among them. Cindy mentioned the attitude was one of volunteerism. It was one of enthusiasm. People were freely willing to give what they had. What were some of the things that indicated that? Like to what extent were these resources gathered? Tanya.
Well, they had to basically make them stop.
Okay.
Because giving them more than enough.
Okay, good. So there's so much that they kind of hit their quota for everything that they need to complete the plans as God has given them. And Moses basically has to kind of put up a poster or send out a message to say, hey, everybody, you can stop giving now. We've got more than enough. Which is remarkable. And I think this starts to show us Israel in a good moment. I know it's easy for us to look at the wilderness and to look at Sinai and to kind of point to all of these examples of a lack of faith or unbelief. But there were times of great trust that they display. There are times of great affection that they show for God. And I think this is one of them. Coming especially on the heels of this incident where they took the wealth of Egypt and they used it to build an idol, or they gave it to Aaron, and Aaron built this golden calf. On the heels of that, now I think what we see is kind of the reverse of that picture. Now what they're doing is they're using the gifts that God has given them for the right reason, for his glory, to create a suitable dwelling place for him. There's a lot, by the way, we won't spend too much time going in this direction, but I just want you to think about that as it relates to our attitude and what we give the Lord today. Obviously, we do every Lord's Day, we have a time where we set something aside, we contribute for the work of the group here, for needs that come up. But I think that this is a concept that goes a lot deeper than that, and it relates to even how we use our resources on a regular basis during the week outside of this assembly. Whenever we have opportunities to use them for the Lord's good, is that our attitude? Are we eager to do that? Or is this something where the attitude is more of kind of a me first attitude?
Okay, so that's
the initial preparation for the building of the tabernacle. Anything else that anybody wants to zoom in on or discuss with any of that? Talk about with any of that? Bruce?
Well, and as you mentioned, this contribution to giving, they didn't provide any of it. It all came from Egypt, wherever, from God. And like you just mentioned, even when they get done giving it all, there's still plenty left over. Well, same thing taught in the New Testament. God says, you give, and I'll replenish it.
Okay.
You can't outgive me. And so
Okay.
if we realize that everything we have, and it's often mentioned, when we're doing our contribution, that the gifts that we have came from God anyway. We're just giving back. And so when we have that knowledge and that heart, it's easy to give.
Okay, good. It really is, because it opens us up to this idea of stewardship. And I think that's one of the things that it's easy to kind of get wrong in our culture, because we're so individualistic. We're so quick to kind of talk about the things that we have as the fruit of our labors, and look at all the things that we've done to earn what we have. But it doesn't matter what skills, what gifts, what talents we have, how much work we've put in. I think to Bruce's point, all of that ultimately is because of the Lord's work in our lives. The skills that we've gotten, the positions He's put us in to be able to learn certain things or to have opportunities. So because of that, it really is important for us to see everything that we have as a gift or a stewardship from Him. Phil and
Yeah, we might take a lot of this stuff out of context, but what we just got through, we referred back to Aaron and the golden calf and all that, and the punishment that came because of that, and the forgiveness that came from that.
Good.
Okay, and then Moses' face shining as a reminder that God was in their presence, and then we lead up to this, their willingness to give.
Good.
So I don't think we can take all of that out of context of what had just happened over the whatever period of time that was.
Good.
That their attitude had changed because of all this that had happened, most likely.
Good. Yeah, absolutely. The response to deliverance, the response to forgiveness, the response to grace should always be kind of this attitude to say, whatever I have is yours, God. And I think that that's a really important point, not just deliverance from Egypt, but deliverance from their blatant violation of the covenant before the laws had even been finished setting in stone, so to speak. And they're down there in the camp breaking the covenant. And yet God, for all of for every reason that He had to destroy them, and to start with Moses, God shows mercy on them. And I really like that point. I appreciate that. That perhaps what we see here is a response to the grace and the mercy and the patience and the forgiveness that God is showing them. Very good. Wayne, yes, sir.
Not to just belabor the point, but the idea that God always gives first, whether it's us, whether it's them, and even down to the skills that the craftsman had, the seamstress, everything was a God-given skill. And if you think about that, a first generation God-given skill from God, what the beauty of a lot of this had to be and the perfection of it, these were people that had skills that are not normal.
Good.
The way I read it, God made them and gave them this stuff. And they would have been things of great beauty, something that would attract and like art. In other words, big pieces of art.
Good.
Extreme pieces of art. But even that, all of it came from God.
Very good. We'll come back to those two guys here in just a minute, but I think this principle that we're really digging deeply into is one that we can't really overemphasize, and that is there is no such thing as giving too much, or there's nothing that's asked of us that's too high of a price when what's being offered in return is the presence of God, like the dwelling place of God. This is, in some ways, I mean, what's happening here in Exodus is something that has not happened, maybe you could say since the garden. I don't know, maybe that's overemphasizing it. But the fact that God says, I'm going to choose a specific people, I'm going to dwell among them, is remarkable. And I think we even see parallels with this when we think about messianic comparisons. When Jesus comes in the flesh, the Word becomes flesh and dwells among us. The idea is that Jesus is coming to tabernacle here, just as God did with his people. It's really interesting that the onset of that comes in connection with people who voluntarily bring valuable gifts as an acknowledgement of this special occasion. You have that with the Magi, the kings that come from the east and bring these gifts. And so in some ways, I think you have kind of a shadow of that here. God is going to dwell with his people. And so what that means is that his people are going to show up and offer him whatever they have and say, what we have is from you, and therefore it belongs to you and it's for your use. So the two guys that Wayne referred to here, what were their names? Anybody want to try to tackle that? I won't count off for mispronunciations. I don't even know if I say it the right way, so just say it confidently and we'll call it good. Bezalel, however you want to say it. And who's the other guy? Aholiab. Yeah, Bezalel and Aholiab are the two craftsmen that God gifts, as Wayne pointed out, with abilities that really went above and beyond what they naturally had. I mean, God gave them ability to be able to do this. I love that picture because it reminds us that when God asks us to do something, he gives everything we need to be able to do it. There's not an instruction that he gives. There's not an expectation that he has for us that we can't, that he doesn't help us meet with the materials or the resources necessary to meet it. So really important detail there. Now, a lot of the text, as you know, is really just the details of this kind of playing out. You have, as detailed as the instructions were when Moses received them on Mount Sinai, that's about as detailed as the record of the construction of these, or the completion of the details, the carrying out of the details, here in chapters 35 through 40. So the tabernacle, all of the coverings for the tabernacle, all of the linens and the drapes and all those things, all the furniture in the tabernacle, all that is here in the text. All of the garments for the priests who were going to serve in the tabernacle, I mean, all of that is mentioned in great detail here. Even the cost of it is mentioned. So what I want to do is, instead of going into detail, and if you have any specific things you want to mention about any of those details, that's great. Your comments are welcome. But was there anything that you noticed, kind of big picture, as you read through this description of the work? Anything that stood out to you about how it was accomplished, or how Moses went about doing it, or how these guys, Bezalel and Aholiab, went about their work? Is there anything that stood out? Alan, and then Phil, and then Bruce.
About the two guys, part of it was they were given that directly from the Spirit, but then they were to teach it to others.
Good.
It's sort of a pattern we see throughout Scripture. Even when the Lord's building his church, he has apostles and prophets, mean, God could have directly inspired every builder in how to build, but the way God works over time is to work directly through a few to equip the whole.
Okay, good. So really important principle there that has parallels to what God builds today with us, that he gives certain people with specific abilities, specific roles that are unique to them, that not everybody shares, and then part of their responsibility is to then take those in those roles or with those gifts to teach others, to train others who are going to continue. And I think we see that today in the fact that what God has built on Jesus is something that includes a foundation of the apostles and prophets. Not everybody had those or had those gifts, but they use those gifts to teach. They use those gifts to lay the foundation through the influence of the Spirit, as Alan pointed out. And so we get to benefit from that. We learn from their work, and in that way we get to participate as well. Very good. Phil, yes, sir.
In the beginning of chapter 37, he specifically mentions that they put poles into the rings to carry the ark.
Okay.
You know, and I think that
Very good.
comes up later on as a very important thing and an example for us. That was the purpose of this being built this way.
Good.
To carry the ark.
Good. And you think about how many years, if you didn't hear what Phil said, he pointed out that there were parts of the ark that are parts of all the furniture that were designed to facilitate carrying without touching the furniture itself. Later on in Old Testament history, that's going to become a problem when people don't follow those instructions, and instead of carrying it in the prescribed way, they carry it in a way that they come up with, and it's gonna cost someone their life. Here's what's interesting about that. That's not going to be for several hundred years at least. And yet, God still expected them to keep these ordinances as he gave them in the beginning. So really, really good point. Bruce, yes, sir.
Back in Exodus 25, it talks about that all these instructions for the tabernacle were given to Moses on the mountain. And he says, make them like the pattern I showed you in the mountain.
Good.
And then in Hebrews, he repeats that, talking about the new ministry, the new work in Hebrews 8, and he uses that same pattern. He said, like when God told Moses to make it like the pattern. So, here's how you do it.
Good.
So he gave them all the information and expects us to follow that pattern.
Very good, very good. And to tie in with that, one thing, for all of the details that might be easy to kind of glaze over or gloss over in the text, one thing that I think really stands out maybe more than anything else, there's a phrase that is used that is stated at the conclusion of every building or every part or the completion of every part of this project. Anybody notice what that phrase was? Just as the Lord commanded Moses. Very good. So if you have one of those Bibles that has like a paragraph or divides the text up in paragraphs, if you look at the end of each paragraph, as Rhonda pointed out, every piece of furniture, everything that God gave instructions for, it's clearly indicated that Moses did it just as the Lord commanded. Or the builders, whoever was in charge of it, they did it just as the Lord commanded Moses. I don't think that is coincidental at all. I think that is the kind of the lead up to how the book is going to end. All of this is preparation for a dwelling place for the Lord among his people. But the only way that's going to happen is if this work is done just as the Lord commands. Think about the significance of that. Again, I know we kind of keep coming back to this from time to time, but for the recipients of this history, the generation that's getting ready to go into the land, who's reading this, think about how important those reminders would be to them. Everything you're going to do, every success that you're going to have, every city that you're going to conquer is only going to come when you do things exactly like God tells you. And when Israel crossed into Canaan and they did just as the Lord commanded, they were victorious. When they didn't, that's when they failed. So these were lessons that were life or death lessons for them, and really no less important for us today. Phil, yes, go ahead.
Bruce mentioned Hebrews 8, and throughout that, using the Old Testament as an analogy of today, etc. Wanted to have the Hebrew writing goes back to the tabernacle. As much emphasis as the Israelites put on Solomon's temple and the one that got rebuilt after the exile and the one that was rebuilt later by Herod or whatever, their emphasis stayed on the temple and they forgot about the tabernacle. And the Hebrew writer pulls us back to the tabernacle,
Okay.
not the temple.
Okay.
And I think that's important because this whole history that we're seeing here reminds us of how God was. Man put the temple in there, God referred back. And then even Paul goes back before the law to tell them about what's going on. This is how it's supposed to be before the law. So
Okay.
the Hebrew writer and Paul and all that go back to these times and everything before all this other stuff got mixed in.
Okay.
I'm not saying the temple was against God's will or anything.
Right,
But
right.
God puts it back to the tabernacle. Study of this is important.
Okay, good. Yeah, and along with that, I mean, just think about why the tabernacle would be such a point of focus beyond just the temple, especially when we get to the New Testament. I think one of the things that becomes clear when you look at the what had become of Judaism during the New Testament, during the life of Jesus, during the first century, one of the things that had become problematic was the confidence or the overconfidence that the Jews placed in this physical temple. Because of this building, we know that God is with us, which was always, whenever Israel got to that point, Old or New Testament, it always set them up for failure. This idea that this is the temple, this is God's dwelling place, so he's going to take care of us and it doesn't really matter what we do. It led to all kinds of violations of the covenant, all kinds of idolatry or mistreatment of each other. And when that persisted, it got to a place where God basically said, I'm leaving this building because you're not the people that I'm expecting you to be. So the emphasis on the tabernacle, I think, is important because it shows us that it doesn't really matter where we are. God can be with his people, and he wants to be with his people, and he'll be with his people if his people do the work to give him a suitable dwelling place. So really good. Bruce, yes, sir.
And along with that point, this tabernacle was built right after Sinai. And so they're carrying, this is a mobile place to work
Yes.
with it. So they're carrying it they're moving it around for more than 40 years, even when they get into the promised land. So,
Right.
God is saying, I'm going to be with you, build it like this, and, I'll be there. And so to your point, he says, I'm going to be with you.
Right.
And hopefully setting that up every time with okay, God's here.
Good. Yeah, the location does not matter nearly as much as the presence of God. You can be anywhere as long as the presence of God is there, then there's going to be security. But if you look for security in any other place without God, you're going to be left wanting. Yes, ma'am, Lois.
Really all that God commands is a theme in Moses' writings. He said the same thing about Noah.
Good.
Built an ark the way God.
Okay, good. So God knows how to build things. And really, the best thing we can do is just go with that, follow along with the instructions that he gives. And whatever we get to be a part of in terms of his building project is going to be remarkable. Very good. So Bruce mentioned something I want to circle back to. The time frame here. By the time the tabernacle is built, or what is the time stamp on the construction of the tabernacle? When is it finally constructed? Anybody catch that? Okay, good. The first month of the second year, first day of the month. So, and remember that their calendar started from the last plague, from the Exodus, Passover, leaving Egypt. So a year has passed from the time that they've left Egypt to the time that the tabernacle is now built. What do you make of that time frame? Do you see any significance to the amount of time that passes? Phil?
They couldn't have done this on the move.
Okay.
So they had to be sitting right there while they did it.
Good, good. So this whole time they're at Sinai, and God is taking care of them, allowing them the time that they need to finish this work. But I think it also just says a lot about, if God's going to dwell with them, how much time and effort is it going to take to get this thing ready? Like, this is not a quick, bring home tent that you can put up in your backyard in a couple of hours. This is something that took a lot of work, a lot of diligence, careful attention to the details that had been given. So that was all part of what it was going to take for God to dwell among them. Yes, sir.
This is a weird question, I think, really, but it's confusing to me. I was doing a lot of research on this. We know that the estimated amount of people that came out of Egypt was like 1 million people, or people have estimated that there were 1 million people. In one centralized location like the tabernacle, how could all of these individuals offer individual sacrifices like they were commanded to do on the brazen altar? And that would be interesting. I would like to be a fly flying around and seeing how that all transpired, because I was looking at sources to try to figure out the efficiency and how that could have been done, because it was an awful busy place apparently, because we all sinned.
Right.
And even unintentional sins, when they found that out, they were to offer other sins, and it talks about the individual doing that. What's your cut on that? One source said they also had other altars, but how would this be treated as the main altar and how it was used? We know there were feast days, they came and did these feast days, but it kind of indicates that it was to be used regularly for everything.
Yeah, great question, and I wish that I had an answer for you. The only thing that I think I've come across is just kind of what you referenced, that basically sacrifices were going on from start to finish. This was a constant thing that involved basically nonstop activity. So it would have been a busy place. It would have been a pretty bloody place too, of course. But I don't know. Does anybody have any thoughts about that, or anything you've come across to explain kind of the logistics of the offering of sacrifices for a nation of millions of people? I suppose one answer could be that we know that there were some offerings that were prescribed by the law that were representative for all the people. And certainly that would simplify it. But to your point, a lot of these offerings, the ones that we'll get into in Leviticus,
Put their hands on the offering.
yeah, this is individual. So
many people.
right.
We know the priests were the ones that did the offering sacrifices, but the people were involved in that. Yeah, it's just how expediting that and so forth.
Right. And I don't know, I suppose maybe one possibility is that maybe you could have more than one sacrifice being offered at one time. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. But Bruce?
And that's another thing that always kind of stuck me. They were complaining because they didn't have food. They got thousands of animals. Maybe they know those are God's animals for sacrifice. But when they're saying we don't have anything to eat, I'm thinking there's a lot of animals there.
Yeah, it's all a matter of perspective, I guess. So the tabernacle is completed. Everything is brought to Moses. He inspects it. It all passes inspection. And so he blesses the people. And then he builds the tabernacle that's been basically a year in the making. He personally oversees all of it. And the book of Exodus ends with this amazing scene. When Moses finishes the tabernacle, what happens? How does God kind of show his approval for what has taken place? Eddie? Yes, sir.
The cloud of glory comes up over the
Okay. Good. So a cloud comes and covers and fills the tabernacle to the point that Moses can't even go into it. In fact, one thing to notice, kind of connecting this for next week, is when the book of Leviticus begins, where Exodus leaves off, God speaks to Moses, and Moses is standing out in front of the tabernacle. He can't go in yet. And so you have the glory of the Lord, but even Moses, who experienced this up on the mountain, was with him for 40 days and nights, even he can't fully go in or fully kind of experience the glory of the Lord on this occasion. I think in some ways that sets up what Leviticus is going to be all about, because Leviticus is going to address kind of the follow-up issue here. Even though they've got the tabernacle in place, even though everything is made and constructed, what still has to happen before the people, before God's going to, or before the people can approach God, before the priest can approach God? They have to be cleansed. Sacrifices have to be offered. We're not going to see that really until we get into Leviticus. So I think, if anything, it just reinforces this idea that God dwelling among his people is not something that is that's easy to do. It's not something that could just be kind of taken lightly, but it was something that was very costly. That's never changed, by the way, for the people of God. I mean, what is the cost required for God to dwell among his people today? It's nothing short of the blood of his own son. And so I think we have all kinds of things in the New Testament that speak to the kind of care that we have to exercise so that we don't grieve the Spirit of God. You think about what Paul told the Corinthians about if anybody despises the temple of the Lord, the people of God, then that comes with great consequence. So again, a lot of parallels here. Other observations, anything else that anybody wants to point out, Bruce?
Well, as you mentioned, we can talk about they have to be cleansed before they can go into the presence of God or be part of that. Well, same way with us today. The sacrifice has been made, but now we have to be cleansed. And of course, that would be, baptism would be a symbol of that cleansing.
Good. And what we'll see next week is that there were different kinds of sacrifices. Some of them were to bring about cleansing or atonement. Some of them were to celebrate it and to thank God for providing for it. But we'll work our way into that as well. And then the last detail of the book of Exodus deals with the traveling of the people. How did they know when to travel and when to stay somewhere? What was the key? Tanya, yes, ma'am.
If the cloud lifted, they traveled, the cloud stayed, they stayed.
Good. What does that signify to you? The fact that the cloud was kind of the thing that set the agenda for them for 40 years. What do you think the point is that God's trying to teach his people? Ann, yes, ma'am.
Being led by the Lord.
Absolutely. Good. Total dependence on him. They're going through an area, it's not like they've got markers along the way. This is wilderness. Nobody lives in this place. So the only way they're going to survive is by following the Lord, going where he goes, stopping where he stops, doing what he says. Yeah, very good. Do you have something else?
I think about Aaron, how far he got off the track there when he was with Moses from the very beginning, and how he got completely off the track. It's in my mind, I can't hardly believe that, but he got back. God accepted him back. So.
Good. And there's a lot that we learn in this about the patience of God with his people. Very good. Okay, I think we will stop there. Any final thoughts anybody wants to share? Okay, so for next week, the material for Leviticus is on the table in the lobby. Go ahead and pick up a packet. We'll cover lesson 22 next week. At some point, we will probably have to combine some lessons, but for next week, just start with lesson 22, and we'll go through that. Thanks, everybody.